As we've discussed in the Arlong Park video long ago, the Fishman work as this very overt representation of oppression and racism. Arlong seeks to reclaim his power and this feeling of humiliation that was afflicted upon him and his people by doing what was done to him. He takes over the Kokoyashi village where Nami grew up and forces humans into subjugation. Now, Oda creates this very interesting story using real-world politics, although there's really no example of it in the real world. Now, I already had the politics of Fishman Island spoiled for me back then and hinted at its connection in that initial video. About 400 episodes later, we are building on the story of Arlong and learning the background for his anger. Arlong and the other fishmen have historically been subjugated by the humans, and we get a glimpse of this in Sabati Archipelago, with the mermaids being a high commodity in the slave trade. It's this show of dehumanization, although I guess they're not humans, but viewing these living beings as a prize or an object, which is then further expanded upon in this arc as we learn about Queen Otohime and Fisher Tiger, the figure who freed the slaves and Mary Joise, including Boa Hancock. These two figures symbolize the duality of how the oppressed internalize and fight against their oppressors, those who choose peace and those who choose revolution. Is there a right or wrong answer? What happens when people are driven into a corner, neglected and treated as inferior? What does that do to someone? We get introduced to Hordy, our enemy of the arc. He grew up in the slums looking up to Arlong and became this symbol of radicalization and this vengeful being who seeks to carry out what Arlong failed at. But can he really be blamed for feeling this way? Or is it the fault of his circumstances or his oppressors? Today, through the Fishman Island arc, we will explore revolutionaries, radicalization, and how it's a perfect allegory for every outcome of oppression. But as always, before we do, I'm gonna need you to subscribe. It is completely free, okay? Just click. It's a click of a button. Okay, I just spit complete bars at you, back-to-back bars. Why wouldn't you? That's my question for you. I'm gonna need you to answer it right now. I also have Instagram, I have TikTok, Patreon, Discord. On Discord, you connect with your fellow community members. It is my goal for this year. So that Discord is going to be popping. Okay, I don't use Discord, so I don't know if I'm supposed to be doing something. I need you guys to be more active. Okay, I'm gonna need more motion. But that Discord will be popping as frick by the end of this year, especially if I meet my goal of 16k, which we will. Okay, I'm manifesting it. Patreon, you get exclusive access to behind the scenes content of how I make videos just like this. I uploaded a sneak peek for this video and an outline. So if you want to see that for future One Piece videos, future videos in general, then you can join one of those tiers or pay $1 if you just want to support either there or on here on YouTube, where you get cute emotes that you can put in the chat. So or you don't have to do any of that. The choice is up to you, but I'm offering you so much stuff, you know, you can't really go wrong. But I also just wanted to say, like, hi people. I haven't said hi in so freaking long. Not that long, I guess, just since last year, but that's like almost 3 months or 3 months by now. That's a long time. I have a bit of a time crunch, but I really wanted to get this video out because I know a lot of you have been wanting a One Piece video. It's been like, I think the last one was in November, so it's been like 4 months. It was due time for more One Piece. So I rushed to get this outline to you, but don't worry, it's still gonna be good, still gonna be exceptional, because guess what? I'm that girl. I also dressed up today as, I'm trying to dress up as a Fisher Tiger. We're both, you know, he's a black coated individual. So we got the same hair, we got the same curls. I don't have a green top to be, you know, to look like him, but I do got the map on my bandana or whatever. It's giving explorer, it's giving pirate. And then I did, my makeup is like, you know, he's red. So, you know, I'm trying to make a connection there with the limited funds I have. You know, one day when I get some coins, these One Piece cosplays are going to hit. They're really going to hit. But for right now, I'm trying to find scraps to put it together. But honestly, I feel like by the time I get coins to do these cosplays better, I'll probably be caught up on One Piece by then. So, but girl, we're just gonna do our best. So to get into this arc, there are two main figures within this arc that represent the duality of protest. Does one choose peace or revolution? Is one good or bad, or do they both have a place within emancipation? As I was watching, I began to connect these two to real life figures in emancipatory movements. Virtually every emancipatory movement has this dynamic of choosing between peace or violent action. Now, I do want to preface that violent action doesn't necessarily mean murdering people. It could be violence against property. In fact, I feel like that's most of the time, sometimes where these movements go towards. Either organizations or movements start off peacefully and then transition to violence, like the IRA from Ireland, or do both simultaneously, sometimes under different leadership, like here in America with MLK and the Black Panthers, the ANC in South Africa, the Jewish people during the Holocaust, and the Palestinian emancipation movement. For an example, the first Intifada was largely peaceful and consisted of boycotts and demonstrations. But honestly, reading about it reminds me a lot of the boycotts that went on during like the civil rights movement here in America. Like I said, it was boycotts, it was peaceful demonstrations. It wasn't until the second Intifada that violence was used on a wider scale. Now, Queen Otohime is our peacekeeper. She is our peaceful dove. She's, like I said, the queen of Fishman Island, married to Neptune, and the mother of Shirahoshi, the mermaid princess, who is the reincarnation of Poseidon, meaning she can control the sea kings. It's a lot of connections and information, but hopefully you watch this arc. I don't know why you'd be watching this video and you've never seen Fishman Island. But if you're doing that, absorb that information how you will. Otohime is also a reference to the Japanese folktale Urashima Taro, in which a character of the same name is the princess of the Ryukyu Kingdom, which is the same kingdom in One Piece. That's just a little cool fact. My boy Oda was doing his research for, I don't know if that's like a popular folktale in Japan, I don't know. Either way, that's pretty cool. When we meet her in the flashback, I'm pretty sure the first scene we see of her is her trying to convince her citizens to coexist with humans and to sign a petition to live next to them. No one wanted to sign it though, because they were all convinced humans would inevitably betray them. But that didn't deter her. She still continued to teach kids about the surface and give speeches in the streets. A huge event in her story is whenever she saved a celestial dragon from being murdered by his previous slaves. The noble, despite this, threatened to shoot her, but Shirahoshi, in a panic, screamed out, accidentally calling the Sea Kings and causing the noble to faint. Regardless, Otohime still asked Aladdin, the doctor of the Sun Pirates, to heal him. Whenever the noble healed, she left with him to negotiate with the world nobles, despite the disapproval from her people. But she came back with a piece of paper saying that Fishman Island could join the world government if she receives enough signatures. It was this moment of hope for the island, where they started to briefly believe that they could truly coexist with the humans. Sadly though, she was assassinated after all the signatures she needed to join the world government had been set on fire by someone. She was shot by what was believed to be a human at the time, reigniting mistrust among the fishmen. So as she is this peaceful dove, I think the most apt person to connect her to is definitely MLK. Martin Luther King was known as a largely peaceful activist who led the charge in some of the most famous demonstration speeches and protests in American history. Similar to Otohime, he understood that integration of all American citizens was an important step in civil rights. Isolation only breeds more hate. But when you now have generations of white kids who grow up next to black people or, Mexican people or just different people of different races, those kids can see for themselves that they are just regular people. Not to say that kids at the first desegregated schools were chill. I feel like by the time you enter elementary school, you're already inundated with a lot of white supremacy without even knowing it. They were probably, not the best, but surely, the generations after that, and definitely my generation, are better. They're still, I've told stories on this channel about microaggressions and they're still kind of racist, but they're much better than during the 60s and the 50s. Which is, that's nice. We moved, we got better, kind of, but the propaganda that generations before that were inundated with becomes more and more shallow. Not to say that this transition is easy. In fact, the desegregation of schools and transportation was famously violent. The day Charlene, Hunter, and Hamilton Holmes were admitted to the first desegregated university, a riot broke out, and they were taunted by pro-segregation protesters. And of course, we all know Ruby Bridges had to be escorted by federal marshals every day to school to keep white supremacists from killing this 6-year-old child. Otohime, similarly to MLK, had a connection to the other side of the civil rights movement. They both recognized, or at least understood, that violent protests was necessary. Although liberals have whitewashed MLK's stance over the years, he was much more radical than we think. Dare I say, a socialist or a leftist? I don't know. Famously, he said that riots are the language of the unheard. I actually heard this quote for the first time from Markiplier, which is, I feel like that's pretty crazy, right? But it was during COVID, during the BLM movement. He was one of the only people that I heard online that was maybe they're rioting for a reason. Maybe they're not just burning buildings and police precincts for the heck of it. Maybe there's a reason for why they're doing that. Maybe there's an anger. Markiplier is the freaking GOAT. Okay, you can't tell me otherwise. He's the freaking GOAT. MLK even linked this statement back to class struggle, stating the rumblings of the discontent from the have-nots within the mist of an affluent society. Now, Joe Biden during the BLM movement evoked his name to speak out against looting, but despite being alive during MLK, and really since Jesus was born, he forgot that MLK made a clear distinction between violence against people and property. He said in a speech that looting, one type of rioting, was a form of social protest that served many functions. It was mainly intended to shock the American community. Looting enabled the deprived to take hold of consumer goods with the ease of those with money in their purses. Knowing that this society cherishes property above people, he is shocking it by abusing property rights. Despite MLK not advocating or leading the charge on this type of protest, he still understood and respected it. As I'll explain, both Otohime and Fisher Tiger, despite having disagreements, still had respect for each other, especially as the only ones fighting for social change. Now, Fisher Tiger was the leader and founder of the Sun Pirates and a revolutionary activist for Fishman rights. As stated earlier, he was a former slave who ventured back to Mary Louise after escaping to single-handedly free all the slaves. What a giga chad. Even though most regard him as the complete opposite of Otohime, someone who doesn't want fishmen and humans to live together, I think this is a clear indication that that's not exactly the case. Whenever he freed these slaves, like I said, he freed Boa Hancock and her sisters, and plenty of the slaves were not fishmen. Before his capture, he was the protector of the Fishman district, or the poorest, most neglected area, the hood of Fishman Island. He left from time to time to venture out into the seas, where he was eventually captured by the world nobles and sold into slavery. His time as a slave only deepened his mistrust of humans and his desire for revolutionary action rather than peaceful demonstration. So we get this intersection between slavery and the class struggle with this character. After the formation of the Sun Pirates, they battled numerous Marines, but two incidents would change Tiger's mind forever. First one was after seeing Arlong's pent-up anger as he brutalized a Marine. Tiger sat down with Jinbei and Arlong and told them that he didn't want to kill humans anymore. Arlong obviously did not F with this and resisted this new change. He later told Jinbei individually that the demons in his own heart were the most terrifying of them all. Second was the rescuing of Koala, or a former slave. The Sun Pirates, while at sea, visited an island where the inhabitants had this little girl, but they couldn't take her back home. And they asked Fisher Tiger to, and he agreed. Now, the entire time she refused to cry, and in the most terrifying, creepy manner, she always kept this forced smile on her face. Fisher Tiger recognized that she was still holding on to this enslaved mentality, and so we put the mark of the sun on her. Now, all of these slaves at Mary Louise are burned with the symbol of the celestial dragons or something. But whenever the Sun Pirates were founded, they instead, to free themselves, similarly to Koala, put the mark of the sun on them. So now she could, finally be free, and she burst into tears and finally showed emotion and took that creepy smile off her damn face after returning Koala to her hometown. However, the residents reported him to the Marines, betraying him even though he just brought back their child. Like, that's crazy. On the account of kidnapping a celestial dragon's property, they shot and killed him. And in his final moments, he told his crewmates that no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't bring himself to accept humans. He also told them to not tell the fishermen about his past as a slave, and this is then whenever Arlong split from the Sun Pirates and began terrifying humans out of hatred. Now, it's really hard to pinpoint who Fisher Tiger could represent in a real world level. Is he more equivalent to Nat Turner, who famously rebelled against the slavers in a bloody massacre? Or is he like Huey P. Newton, who founded the Black Panthers, an organization dedicated to Black safety and uplifting the working class? Obviously, no one is going to match Fisher Tiger to a T. He's a fictional character, possibly only inspired by people like this. But his journey from believing in complete isolation from humans to briefly opening his mind to Otohime's ideas reminded me a lot of Malcolm X. Malcolm X was a super bright kid who still ended up falling into crime and poverty in his early years. Found his dad dead at the age of 6, lying on the trolley tracks with suspicions of being murdered by a white supremacist. And his mother grew mentally unwell a few years later from her husband's death and had to be institutionalized. This left Malcolm vulnerable to the streets, crime, and the Nation of Islam. Now, I don't know if the NOI is necessarily a cult, okay, for sure. So I won't make any accusations. But from my understanding, it's not an official sect of Islam. So do with that information what you will. Allah is no longer called God, but Wallace D. Ford. And the prophet wasn't Muhammad, but Elijah Muhammad. Elijah helped to form Malcolm's initial worldview. He stated Black people needed to stop looking for acceptance from white people and instead accept themselves. Eventually, this led to Malcolm's beliefs of racial isolation from the white devils, as he called them, and his argument for Black power, Black self-defense, and Black economic autonomy, which went on to inform groups like the Black Panthers. But then Malcolm started to doubt Elijah's word. Sexual misconduct allegations were surfacing, and Malcolm was expected to help cover it up. But he decided in that moment, nah, I'm out, and he left. But he didn't lose his faith. He, in fact, went on a trip to Mecca, or a pilgrimage to Mecca, that changed everything. To me, Mecca was Fisher Tiger's koala. It was the experience he needed to see a different perspective of racial dynamics. He stated that there were tens of thousands of pilgrims from all over the world. They were of all colors, from blue-eyed blondes to black-skinned Africans. We were all participating in the same ritual, displaying a spirit of unity and brotherhood that my experiences in America had led me to believe never could exist between white and non-white. The Holy World was the first I ever had been able to think clearly about the basic divisions of white people in America. In my 39 years on this earth, the holy city of Mecca had been the first time I had ever stood before the creator of all and felt like a complete human being. Now, what a beautiful experience. And whenever he came back to America, he completely switched his stance and grew closer to MLK's understanding of civil rights, stating that true Islam recognizes all men as brothers. He even founded an organization to connect Black individuals with the global South, as it had completely altered and changed his worldview. He was still a figurehead for the Black Power movement, which was more direct and called for self-defense, but similar to MLK, he was granted another perspective to round out his worldview before he was assassinated. So, after exploring both of these characters and their real-world equivalents, which is right, peace or revolutionary action? I think we can safely say both. Fisher Tiger and Otohime had direct communication and respect during their lifetimes, despite their disagreements. He even admitted on his deathbed that Otohime was right. I don't think he was necessarily wrong. Both he and Otohime had completely different economic struggles. She was the queen of this island, and he grew up in abject poverty as a slave, while she had never experienced anything that horrifying. Not to say that you can't come to Otohime's conclusions if you come from poverty MLK literally grew up in the hood of Atlanta. But it is no doubt harder to fully trust your oppressors whenever you've seen such brutality and blatant dehumanization. It's not like he didn't try to change. He definitely did. For a brief moment, he kind of did. He could just never fully convince himself. And I don't view that as necessarily his fault, but the fault of his oppressors and his circumstances. In the same way, I don't believe that there is some sort of supremacy over either non-violent or violent action. They are both the outcomes of systematic oppression. Whenever you back someone into a corner for long enough, it's not really logical to blame them for how they choose to get out of that corner. And no doubt both helped further both racial and class struggles. There's like the Black Panther free lunch program that some schools actually ended up implementing. Not all of them, okay? My school actually at some point had free lunch and I was on it, but then at some point they ripped it away, which I just think is actually evil. I'm nowhere near the poorest person at that school. So imagine someone who is like who needs it and can't have it. And school is just freaking expensive, okay? It's like $2 or $3 a day. I can't do math, but that's a lot of money a month. So to rip that away from like someone who like legit can't pay for lunch, like I said, is just evil. I don't know if that's a Texas thing or just my school was evil. I don't know, but somebody needs to answer for their crimes. Both MLK and Malcolm X, without a doubt, had an impact on inspiring people to protest and take action against their governments, despite one being uplifted over the other. Malcolm X being this largely unspoken of figure when learning about the civil rights movement shows how liberals and the American government framed these events and whitewashed them, but we all know the truth. At least after watching this video, we all know the truth. We're on the same page. Now there's a third side to this coin. Of course, coins can't have three sides, but you get what I'm trying to say. Some who are oppressed, like Arlong, become overcome with anger and refuse, similarly to their oppressors, to coexist. I want to examine how this development occurs and whether or not we can truly blame someone like Hordy for his beliefs. Hordy, our villain of the arc, grew up in the slums looking up to a figure like Arlong. They began to form this supremacist worldview. After all, Fishmen were naturally stronger and possibly heaven sent to be superior to humans. As he grew older, he would kill even fishmen who offered blood transfusions or colluded with humans in any way. Seeing as his queen Otohime's very mission was to become equal with the humans, he ended up being the one who actually assassinated her whenever she was closest to achieving her dream. He of course lied about a human doing it to reignite mistrust among the fishmen, but she still told her children before she died, no matter who did this, forgive them. After Arlong's defeat by the Straw Hats, Hordy took on the role of carrying through what Arlong had started and founded the New Fishman Pirates. In the present day, when the Straw Hats meet him, he's essentially planning a coup d'etat on Neptune. He infiltrates the palace, ties up the royal family, and rounds up any dissidents on the island. In his first encounter with the Straw Hats, he takes his energy steroids to revive himself after being defeated by Zoro. It's a really interesting inclusion in the story as the steroids work to make him stronger, but also progressively drive him more insane. So I really took the pills to be like almost a metaphor for radicalization, which we've talked about a lot on this channel. But radicalization is a slow process. It's progressive. It doesn't just, you're not just diving in deep to like the worst things you can do. It's progressive. And I think that's shown through his progressive transformation as he takes more and more. He turns on his own fishmen, forcing them to step on the image of Otohime or be executed. He also takes the signatures from the palace, and he's like, anybody whose name is on here, you're getting got. As he physically changes, he becomes sharper and moves away from his square shape language, which to me symbolizes his instability. Square as a shape in art, or maybe just in general, is viewed as stable. It symbolizes stability to us. But as he moves away from that shape and becomes a literal triangle, obviously he's sharper, he's more emotional. Eventually, of course, Luffy defeated him and saved Fishman Island from the Noah crashing on it. Despite this prophecy that he would be the one to destroy it, I really am not quite sure still what that is about. but he didn't destroy Fishman Island. Hordy himself is not obviously a good person. I struggle on whether I should put the blame of his outcome solely on him. He, of course, is a murderer and a supremacist, and his ideology doesn't help him or his people. Really only does the opposite. He was destined to self-destruct because his ideology itself is naturally destructive. It calls on him to turn on his own fishermen, whom he supposedly believes are superior, and murder them in the conquest of achieving this almost fascist vision. There was no world where that attitude would yield the outcome he desired for his people and for the island. It's inherently contradictory. It kind of reminds me of like Zionism and how the brand of Israel as a nation is this safe haven for Jews, but they simultaneously collaborate with anti-Semites, have been the cause for expulsion of Jewish people from like Middle Eastern countries, and have this ideology that dictates Jewish people must fit into this image that honors Israel's existence, and if they don't, then they're illegitimate and bad Jews. Once again, it's contradictory in nature and is not a sustainable ideology. Now, where I differ in my analysis between Zionism and Hordy is that he is an individual. Like, I would not offer the same charitability to an Israeli citizen as I would to the government itself. People like Netanyahu and Ben Gvir understand the dynamics of Zionism, and they understand it very well as a fascist ideology, and that is their goal. Their goal is to carry out a genocide, carry out ethnic displacement of Palestinians, and really anybody that's close to them at this point. They very well know what they're doing. As with an Israeli citizen, like an individual, they have just been inundated with propaganda and believe that this stuff will help them without examining it further. But I believe those people can actually have the possibility to change, if that makes sense. I don't want I've talked about Palestine a lot in this channel, so I would like to think everybody knows my position, but I want to clarify that I am in no way a Zionist apologist. But I believe that Hordy wouldn't have come to this conclusion had this systematic subjugation of the fishmen not existed. Both him and Arlong's path, although violent and disagreeable, is a reflection of the anger and isolation they feel. They have been made to feel inferior, and in this effort to preserve their ego and their pride, they flip the script and rely on the same supremacist rhetoric that was put on them. Hordy is honestly probably closer to a black supremacist than a Zionist, I would say he's ultimately powerless in this overarching system of the world government, but he acts out due to that powerlessness. Because, black supremacists, they ain't got no motion, okay? So they're ultimately, I don't want to say meaningless, but in the grand scheme of things, they kind of are. But maybe I'm being too charitable to Hordy, okay? And Arlong. You can let me know what you think in the comments below. As an overall arc review, I don't think Fishman Island was as bad as people made it seem like it was going to be. It was a pretty standard One Piece arc pacing wise. It was either just as bad as Skypiea or not even as bad. And if you can't get through Fishman Island, you are not getting through Dressrosa. Okay, Dressrosa will make you want to quit watching this series. It legit will. Okay, that's the worst pacing I've ever seen in the show in my freaking life. It was horrible. So if you can't make it through freaking Fishman Island, if you're complaining during this arc, girl, you're not making it. You're not catching up. Okay, I don't know what to tell you. But the illustration of racial dynamics, as I pointed out in this entire video, was really well executed from an artistic and written standpoint. I think it perfectly tackled every angle of how the marginalized internalize and process their oppression. Neptune, I view as like almost this middle ground between Fisher Tiger and Otohime. He's honestly closer in ideology to Fisher Tiger. Like, I wouldn't say he's like a moderate or a centrist. He has a stance. He doesn't trust humans, but also his wife is like a huge advocate for integration with the humans. So he kind of struggles and is like pulled back and forth between the two because he knows that he should be more open-minded and charitable, but he just can't bring himself to be. He wants to kill his wife's murderer, but recognizes that she wouldn't want that. Vengeance isn't justice, although he doesn't quite understand that. Also, Sanji, this isn't even in this arc, it's like the technically the arc before Fishman Island. He's annoying as fuck, okay? He's a reactionary piece of shit. His transphobia is the straw that broke the camel's back, as we say in the South. I can't find anything redeemable about him as a character. He sucks. And Oda tries to curve this back. I think he recognizes that like Sanji sucks at some point, and he's like, we gotta make a whole arc where we do Sanji propaganda. But girl, it will not work on me. I will never forget. There's also this scene, I believe at the end of Fishman Island, where Aokiji and Akainu are fighting to be the new fleet admiral. It's kind of cool because I think Punk Hazard is the arc after this in the first island that they go to in the new world. But it's kind of cool because they like end up turning half of the island to like a burnt crisp and the other is frozen, which is pretty cool. Like environment dynamic. But Akainu ends up becoming the new fleet admiral and Aokiji leaves, which kind of goes with the idea that we talked about in the Ines Lobby video, that good cops either leave, die, or stay long enough to become the villain. Evil always wins in these institutions. So of course the guy that killed Ace, murdered Ace, would win over Aokiji, who I suspect is based in Cool. He did end up joining the Blackbeard pirates, which are not based in Cool, but I still have faith that Aokiji is, because he just gives me good vibes. He always has, and he always will, unless something changes that I don't know about. At the end of the arc, we get this really powerful imagery when both Jinbei and Luffy combine their blood. It solidifies the arc's message that they are all the same. They all bleed the same color. It seems so basic and like almost cliche to some, but it's actually quite powerful, especially in the times we are living in. I don't know if many of us realize this, but a lot of us can so easily be convinced by figures like Trump or some internet goons like Andrew Tate or Asmongold. Just insert a right-wing commentator and that'll do the job. But we can so easily be convinced by them that there is some sort of difference between us, whether that be, difference between cis people and trans people, or immigrants and citizens, or whoever. We can so easily be convinced that we don't all deserve to be represented, that band-aid solutions for our historic discrimination like DEI are somehow harmful to institutions and companies. And actually we should, instead of like making better solutions, we should actually roll that stuff back. I think that language definitely holds some sort of meaning to especially to hopeless white men who want to be the victim, which they are in some ways, just not on the boundaries of race. Okay, white men feel the brunt of inflation at the grocery store. They have a hard time getting into college or getting jobs, fulfilling their dreams, which can definitely lead, I've talked about this before, but it can lead to radicalization and hopelessness. So they are the victim on a class basis, but not on the boundaries of race. I just don't know how to tell you this, okay? I'm sorry. Some of the comments from my last video essay really stuck with me. There was a lot of men, or I wouldn't say a lot. It was just it was a few loud men that got a lot to say. But so many of them have fallen victim to white supremacist rhetoric, whether they were white, Mexican, or Native American. At least that's what they proclaim to be, and I'll take their word for it. They, similarly to Hordy, have fallen down this path of anger and radicalization and refuse to believe that their ideology could be wrong in any way. It was just like talking to a brick wall. The sentiment of equality isn't really that shallow. I maintain the position that really not much has changed since MLK's death. He fought for desegregation, which I guess technically by law he won at, but people in the hood are still segregated. That is a direct continuation of segregation. They get worse education, basically gutted public transit, and they still become the campaigns after his death of like racist campaigns like Stop and Frisk, the war on drugs, I think it was, which were backed by liberals like Joe Biden. So sometimes it feels, I think this is kind of depressing to say, but sometimes it does feel as if his death was futile. It feels as if this fight for equality is hopeless. He fought, not even just him, but a lot of Malcolm X, a lot of civil rights leaders on the ground, in the media, fought for us to be more equal, but yet the American government always finds a way to maintain the systems that were in place before, even if the laws that kept them solidified are gone. But no matter if we feel that way, even beyond racial struggles, whatever, you really care about, class struggles, we must not succumb to the same evil that Hordy did. We must maintain our morals and do what is right. Now, there's this beautiful speech that Fukabashi, Otohime's son, gave after her death. Citizens of Fishman Island, there's something I want to tell you today, so please give me your attention. In her last moment, my mother said happily, "We are almost there in the place under the real sun. We have decided to take over our mother's dream and dedicate our lives to seeing it through. You probably are not going to be ready for the World Summit in 2 years, but there will be another one in 6 and another one in 10. I'm sure this tragedy made you change your views of humans, so I will get rid of all the signatures that were left unburned. Let's start from the beginning. And when your emotional wounds heal someday, let's dream of the sun again." As always, I love this show, and there's truly no other work of art like it, and it will always be special to me because of it. Remember that One Piece is political. It's not just political though. It's leftist. Okay, bye.